Lego sets don't last forever. They are actually on a set schedule. They retire after a certain period of time on the shelves. They're only manufactured for a certain period of time. And after they retire, the value starts to increase on eBay and on Amazon and other places. But how long do Lego sets sit on the shelves in retail stores before they actually retire? What is the average shelf life of a Lego set? That's what we're going to answer. I've crunched the numbers. I have some answers for you, and let's jump in. But before we do, I just want to say, if you're new here, welcome to BrickBucks. We talk about Lego investing here, buying Lego sets before that retirement date and holding them as the values increase. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here and if this interests you. And with that, let's jump in and let's talk about this. So the average shelf life of all Lego sets that I looked at in my data set here is about a year and a half. Actually, more specifically, it's around 17 months if I take all of the different sets and just push them all together into one big basket here. So it's around a year and a half, but that's not really the best approach here because some Lego themes have much shorter shelf life than others. Now, a Lego theme, of course, is like a product line, and each of them have a kind of a different approach to the retirement schedules and to their shelf life. So the best way to look at this really is by looking at each of the different themes, and that way you can pick which themes you are most interested in if you're a Lego investor or if you're a collector. What are the themes that you collect or buy as an investment, and understanding the different averages for that theme specifically. And that's what we're going to do here in this video. I'm going to walk through some of the findings around average shelf life for each of the Lego themes out there. I looked at some numbers for Lego sets. Now, the data that I looked at is not every set that was ever released. It's actually data from around 2016 onwards. So sets that were released in 2016 or after that are included in my data here. Now, also the set had to be retired for me to include it, because there's no point in looking at shelf life of sets that are not yet retired, because of course the shelf life will end up being longer. So I just looked at sets that are retired. So that is after 2016 of a release date and have been retired. Now, also, I skipped a couple of themes that are less interesting to Lego investors and collectors, like video or power functions. I know some people out there probably disagree and wish that I included them, but I skipped over those themes. I do have most of the themes in this list. And now also I want to mention that it does not include themes that are completely retired. Like Hidden Side, for example, is a theme that was here. It is no longer with us, so I didn't include it in this analysis. Okay, so that is what we're doing here. We're going to look at the average shelf life of each of the Lego themes in detail. And first up, we're going to start with Lego Architecture. Lego Architecture has a shelf life of around 2.2 years, so just over 2 years on average for Lego Architecture. Now, New York Skyline will not be in this data because, as I mentioned, it doesn't include sets that haven't yet retired, and that set would skew this a little bit because that set has been around forever. So that would make the average a little bit higher if it was included here. But there are also sets out there in the architecture theme that retired a lot sooner than that 2.2 year average. For example, we had Arc de Triomphe, which was only around for around 17 months. That was the shortest shelf life for the architecture theme, and the longest in this data set that I looked at was 3 years. And we had two sets that were around for 3 years. That was Shanghai and the San Francisco Skyline. So two different Skyline sets were around for 3 years, but the average is around 2.2 years. Next up, we have Lego Art. Now, Lego Art obviously is quite a new theme, so we're still learning about this theme, but the average shelf life that we've seen from the sets that have retired so far in this theme, there's only around 4 of them, was 17 months. And all of those sets from this initial wave of Lego Art had the same shelf life. So the average is 17, the shortest is 17, and the longest is 17 because they all had the same shelf life. So 17 months from what we've seen so far in Lego Art. Next up, we have Lego Brick Sketches, and the average shelf life on this is the same. This is also a new theme that we're still learning about and still looking for data on. And from the retired sets already in this lineup, we have the same thing, a 17-month. That is just under a year and a half, right? A year and a half will be 18 months. So this is just under a year and a half for Brick Sketches. The average, the shortest, and the longest are all 17 months for Brick Sketches. Next up, we have Brickheads. Now, the average on this one is really low. So this is just a 10-month average shelf life for Brickheads. So if you ever thought that all Lego sets stay around for around 2 years, but then you want to start investing in Brickheads, you may make some mistakes, right? You may make some mistakes investing in Brickheads if you expect the sets to be around for 2 years, because they don't typically last that long. Now, we do have some that hit 2 years, but a lot of them don't. And the average is around 10 months. Now, if the average is 10 months, that means that there are a lot of sets that are a lot shorter than 10 months, like 6 months, or in the case of some of these sets, just 3 months. So the shortest shelf life that I saw in the data here was 3 months on the shelves, and the longest was around 2 years, and there was multiple different sets in both cases here. Moving on to Lego City now, we have an average shelf life for City of around 1.7 years. The shortest shelf life was just 6 months, and I just saw one set that had that short of a shelf life. That was the Jungle Explorer kit, and the longest was 5 years for the Mobile Command Center. That was around for 5 years. Next up we have Lego Classic. The average on Lego Classic is around 2 years. The shortest was just 1 year for Mission to Mars, and the longest was around 3.5 years. And there was actually 2 sets that was around for that length of time. They were the brick, kind of boxes of brick type sets, and they had 3.5 years on the shelf. Next up we have Lego Creator, and this includes Creator 3-in-1. Average shelf life is 1.5 years for this one. The shortest was around 7 months, and that was multiple different sets that were around for 7 months. And then the longest was 3 years, and that was on Riverside Houseboat 31093. So a 1.5 year average on Lego Creator. Next up we have Creator Expert with an average shelf life of around 2.5 years. Now the shortest shelf life was 4 months, and that was for the limited edition Fiat 500. That was the blue version of that car, and that was limited, so of course it didn't stick around for long. So that's why that one wins the shortest shelf life award. And for the longest shelf life, we have the Parisian Restaurant of 6 years on the shelf. A very, very long time for any Lego set to be on the shelf. That is 10243. Parisian Restaurant. Moving into DC Comics now, we have an average of around 15 months on this one. Shortest shelf life of just 1 month, and that was on the Wonder Woman 77906. That was because it was an event exclusive, and that's why that set was only around for a month. Longest shelf life was 2 years on the 1989 Batmobile 76139. Amazing set, and the values are shooting up on that set right now. Really great set. Next up we have Lego Disney. The average shelf life on Lego Disney is around 16 months. The shortest was 7 months on Rapunzel's bedroom, that is 41156. And the longest is around 2.3 years on the Disney Train and Station. Now when the Disney Castle retires, that's probably going to take the award for the longest shelf life, because that's been around for quite a while. But right now it is 2.3 years for the Disney Train and Station. Next up we have Dots, which has an average shelf life of around 1 year. The shortest is 5 months so far, and there were 2 different sets, bag tags, both of them, the dragon and the unicorn. And then we had the longest shelf life of 1.5 years, and there was multiple different sets that were around for around that same length of time. So a 1 year average for the Dots theme. Next up we have Duplo. The average shelf life of Duplo is around 2 years. Now the shortest is around 7 months, and that was from the Miles Exoflex Suit 10825. And the longest was 4.5 years in this data set that I looked at. That was Town Truck and Tracked Excavator 10812. 4.5 years is quite some time to have a Duplo set on the shelves. Next up we have Lego Friends, and Lego Friends has an average shelf life of around 15 months. The shortest in the data that I looked at was 2 months for the Animal Gift Set, and the longest was around 3 years for Mia's Treehouse 41335. 15 months for Lego Friends, which is quite short when you think about the popularity of this theme. Next up we have Lego Harry Potter, which has an average shelf life of around 20 months. And the shortest shelf life that I saw in the data was 1 year for the Hogwarts Moments Herbology set that just retired at the end of 2021. And that one, of course, was the only moment set to retire, and all of the others are still around today. So that had quite a short shelf life of 1 year. And the longest shelf life that we've seen so far in this theme is 3.4 years from the Whomping Willow 75953. Next up we have Lego Ideas with an average shelf life of around 18 months, and the shortest in the data that I looked at was 9 months with the Maze Building Kit 21305. And the longest was the Saturn V rocket with 2.5 years on the shelf. But here's the thing, it's actually a lot longer than that for the Saturn V, because as we know, this set got re-released. So this was the original Saturn V, was 2.5 years. It retired at the end of 2019, but then the set got re-released in 2020 and it's still on the shelves today. So The actual shelf life of this set, with both different set numbers included, is more like 5 years by the end of it. But 2.5 years, it was still the longest, even with just one of its runs, which is pretty funny. So next up we have Lego Jurassic World, and that is a 21-month shelf life on average, 21 months. The shortest that we saw was 19 months, so it looks pretty likely that most Jurassic World sets are going to be around for, you know, around 2 years. It's getting close to that 2-year mark, even at the shortest that we see in the data. 19 months from 2 of these different sets, and the longest we saw was 2.5 years, which again, that's kind of close to that 2-year mark. So the fact that there's not that much of a delta between the shortest and the longest here, that adds a lot of dependency for this theme, right? We can depend on this. There's a lot of predictability when it comes to the shelf life and the cycles for Jurassic World. We know that it's going to be somewhere close to this average because even the longest wasn't that far out and the shortest wasn't that far before. So, you know, this is kind of dependable. But that longest shelf life of 2.5 years was for the T-Rex Rampage. That is 75936, and there's also the one that's pictured here. But real quick, the sets that are pictured on these slides are mostly chosen at random. They're not chosen for any specific reason. I'm just trying to show the different themes that we're talking about. Next up we have the Marvel theme. This is Marvel superheroes with an average shelf life of 16 months, and the shortest in the data was just 1 month for Taskmaster Ambush 77905. As we know, that is the Black Widow set that was an exclusive for Comic-Con, which is why it had such a short shelf life. I just want to call out that during COVID, when a lot of the events were cancelled, the LEGO Group did partner with retailers to sell some of these exclusive sets. So some of these sets, like the Wonder Woman and the Taskmaster Ambush, were showing up in Targets in the US and different things. That was an effort by the LEGO Group to move the inventory that they had already manufactured for the events. It doesn't mean that they continue to manufacture the set for 6 months or however long we saw those sets existing in retail stores. So even if you saw some of those sets a few months later in a retail store, that was just lingering stock. So we can still really say that a lot of those sets had a very short shelf life, even if they lingered a little bit later in stores. The longest shelf life in the Marvel theme was around 2.7 years, and that is for the Hall of Armor. That is 76125. Next up we have Lego Minecraft with a 21-month average on this theme. The shortest that I saw in the data was 5 months, and that is for Skeleton Attack 21146, and the longest that I saw in the data was 3 years, and that is for multiple different sets. So although we have an average of 21 months, we do also see a lot of sets kind of go a little bit longer than that, so it's kind of less dependable, less predictable, I guess, in some cases when it comes to Minecraft. Next up we have Ninjago. Now we have a 16-month average for Ninjago, quite short again given the popularity of the theme and the demand that's out there. The shortest shelf life is around 7 months, and that's for the Dragon Master sets. There were a handful of them, but they had around 7 months on the shelves, and the longest is around 2 years, and that's also multiple different sets. Now, again, the fact that we see that the longest here for Ninjago is 2 years, that means that we can really kind of make some decisions on some of that, right? We can kind of expect certain things when we know that more often than not, these sets don't stick around any longer than 2 years, because that is the longest. On average, is closer to, 16 months. So that's helpful to know if you are an investor or a collector in the Ninjago theme. Next up, we have seasonal. Now, the seasonal sets have a very short shelf life. So if you're ever interested in buying any of these sets for your collection or for your investments, you got to keep this in mind. The average in these sets is around 9 months on the shelves. Now, this includes things like the Valentine sets, the Halloween sets, and different things like that, and also the Chinese festival sets. The shortest shelf life that I saw was around 2 months, and that was for Elves Workshop 40205, and the longest was 2 years for the Valentine's Picnic and the Valentine's Cupid Dog. That was around 2 years. But around 9 months on average for the seasonal sets. And now we are into Speed Champions. Speed Champions is one that has been quite predictable in the past, but some things have changed a little bit recently. The average shelf life on Speed Champions is around 2 years. Now the shortest was 10 months, and that was on the Porsche 919 Hybrid, that is 75887. The longest was 2.5 years, and that was on 3 different sets. That was on the Senna, the F40, and the Camaro. That were the last wave of 6-stud Speed Champions. They got extended for an extra 6 months beyond what was expected of them. So they kind of had a 2.5 year shelf life, when usually it's around 2 years. That was one of the things that happened in recent memory with Speed Champions that was kind of abnormal. And the second thing that happened more recently is that now we have extensions again on some of the sets that were due to retire at the end of 2022. We have some of those sets getting pushed into 2023. So some of these averages, some of these long shelf life numbers are going to change in the Speed Champions theme. It is becoming less obvious what's happening with these rotations of retirement in Speed Champions. Next up, we have Lego Star Wars, and this has an average shelf life of around 16 months. Now, the shortest in the data that I saw was Bespin Duel 75294, which again was kind of a promotional exclusive set, and that's why it had such a short time on the shelves. The longest in the data that I saw was 4.2 years with Death Star, that is 75159. Now, a reminder that this is only sets released after 2016. There may be sets before that date that were around for longer than the Death Star, so I just wanted to call that out again. Next up, we have Lego Super Mario with an average shelf life of 13 months. The shortest in the data on this one was 1 month for Toad's Hideaway, 77907, and the longest of 2 years goes to Mario's House, which is 71367, which of course is a central set for the theme, so it's no wonder they kept it around for above the average length of time. But the average for Mario is 13 months. And then we have Lego Technic here. Lego Technic has an average shelf life of around 20 months. The shortest shelf life in the data was 1 year. That was Hovercraft 42076. And the longest was around 3 years, and that is for Stunt Racer 42095. Once again, this doesn't include sets that have not yet retired, so some of this information may change, of course, when new sets retire, and I just wanted to make sure to call that out again. But what do you think? Which of these themes caught you by surprise? Was there any of these numbers that you didn't expect? Did you think that some themes had a shorter or a longer shelf life? Let me know in the comments below. Let's get that conversation going. Now, you may be wondering, what is the best way to actually use this information as a Lego investor, right? How do we use this information? And there's a couple of different things that I would say to that. When I first started Lego investing, I had much less access to things like retirement lists than what we have today, right? Today, there's abundance of information out there about what sets are expected to retire, and there's a lot more being published on it. But when I first started, I couldn't really find specific lists of things that were expected to retire. So what I did was I calculated out all of these averages for each of the different themes. What is the average shelf life? And then I just paid attention to that when I was trying to buy sets. When I was buying a set in the Speed Champions theme, I wanted it to be close to the average shelf life, okay? I didn't want to buy it in the first 6 months because on average the sets take 2 years to retire. But with Brickheads, for example, if a set has been around for 6 months, now it's starting to approach the average shelf life, and it runs the risk of being retired at that point, okay? It doesn't mean it's definitely going to retire at that average, because again, the whole idea of an average is that some sets go later than the average. However, it gives you a better chance at being right when you're buying if you kind of get close to the average, or at least buy a couple of months before the average, because again, some sets also retire before the average. You don't want to miss your shot at buying the inventory. So that's the way I kind of approached it, is when I'm approaching that average a couple of months before the average, I would start buying a set. Now, it's less important to do that today because we have retirement lists and different things like that. So we have more information to work on, but I still like to really understand these average shelf lives because it does help with my decision making. I'm not going to buy a set in the first 6 months of its life if the average shelf life is 2.5 years of that theme, okay? It's just less likely that it's going to retire anytime soon. So using this data in the back of your mind when you're thinking about starting to buy something is one way that you can use it. Now, the second thing we can think about when it comes to shelf life is, what is the impact of shelf life on the performance of a set? If a set was around for a long time, does it help or does it hinder its ability to grow in value? And if a set was around for a very short time, like a 4 or 5 month span on a set, is it more likely that it's going to grow in value a lot? Now, we have seen a lot of examples of that happening in the past where a set has an abnormally short shelf life, and as a result, it grows in value even faster. So there are different kind of things. So the shelf life of a set can impact the growth of that set. Now, it's not going to be the biggest impacting factor, okay? It's just going to be one small factor. There's a lot of other things that matter even more than the shelf life by a lot, okay? So sets that have a long shelf life, like the Parisian restaurant, for example, can still grow really, really well in value if the other factors are working well for it. Long shelf life does not mean that a set is not going to perform well. Likewise, short shelf life, it doesn't mean that a set is going to take off like a rocket. That's what we saw with the Taskmaster Ambush set. That set is not really performing the way a lot of people expected it to, even though it had a very short time on the shelves because it was an exclusive set. So as Lego investors and collectors, looking at shelf life is definitely an important thing for a few different reasons, and I hope that this view of the data here really helped you. And once again, this was just sets released from 2016 onwards that have already retired, so I hope that helped to clarify if any of the sets that you expected didn't show up here. Now, if you want to learn more about Lego investing, definitely check out the free Facebook group. We have a completely free Facebook group where we talk about these things, we kind of share interesting information with each other, and the link is in the description below, so make sure you go and check out the Facebook group if you want to learn more about Lego investing. And if you found this video useful and you kind of like having all of this data in one quick and easy place, please hit that like button to let me know. I'll definitely be sure to make more videos like this in the future where I bring you kind of useful information about Lego themes, Lego sets, and different things like that. So hit that like button, let me know that you enjoyed this video. And with that, thank you so much for watching. I'm Shane from brickbucks.net, and I will see you in the next one.